So I was really excited when I heard about Mindhunter, new Netflix original series, because David Fincher, my favorite director, and one of my favorite actresses, Charlize Theron, were behind it. And it sounded like a refreshing take on a very crowded true crime drama theme. Instead of focusing on the crimes totally at hand and showing a lot of gore and action, it was more at the angle of interviewing serial killers. It takes place in the late 70s, based off the book Mindhunter, written by a former FBI agent. And it was really cool that I was using actual serial killers in the past. Some were fake, but most were actual real ones, and I found it super effective. The strongest thing about this show was the characters, and it had 3 central characters. Holden Ford, played amazing by Jonathan Groff. Bill Tench and Wendy Carr, probably knows her from the show Fringe if you watch that. That's Anna Torv. What was so great about these 3 central characters is they're all very different in ways, similar to others, but they each filled a certain role and a certain viewpoint that was a little different from each other. They blended really well and conflicted against each other a lot. So you always were questioning what side you were on in each scene, who you were agreeing with. And to me, it made me feel like I was in the show and made me more into it. Even though it is a very slow burn, especially in the beginning, that always kept me hooked. That always kept my mind stimulated. So that never feels slow to me though. There's a difference between slow burn and boring slow burn. This was just a slow burn, meaning it's a lot of dialogue. Sure, there's a lot of waiting for like an action to happen, but the dialogue's so good and the conflict of choices they make that it keeps you invested. Because if you're really interested in this stuff, this is like cocaine watching this for me. Anything that stimulates my mind, I love. Anything David Fincher-esque, I love, and this has all that right here, and it has great acting and really good characters. So breaking down the 3 characters that you see in this, Holden was special in the sense that he related to the serial killers the most, but that was also his crutch in a way because he'd kind of become unprofessional at times, and he was also more prone to taking on some of the dark stuff that comes with talking to serial killers, and you can see how much it started messing him up in the head more and more. Whereas his partner Bill was more the old school style, plays by the rules, and if you're looking at a good cop, bad cop, in his angle, in interviews, he was always like the bad cop. He was harder on the guy, yelling at the serial killer, or Holden would be more empathetic towards the serial killer. And he's more of a man's man. Bill, he's the character your dad watching the show is gonna love. And if you watch football, he looks exactly like the coach Rex Ryan of the Buffalo Bills. I couldn't get that out of my head watching. And what makes him very relatable to people is he has a lot of family issues they show, especially with his son, his wife, and they delve into that really well, building his character up, so he's very likable. Maybe the most likable on the show. Now Wendy, very intellectual, she has a systematic approach to everything, it's always by the books, and she's all about making this a program and the education angle. And she's orderly. And they have the reveal that we find out she is a lesbian, and in the late 70s it was more frowned upon, so she's not telling anyone at work. She's keeping it hush-hush. And she's also a loner in a way, especially when she leaves her lover and she's living alone and she's feeding this cat and she's like consumed by her work as well, just like all 3 of them, but she has no one she's really taking care of. So these 3 characters, super strong. You see how different they are and really hold this show down. Now the opening scene of the show, literally in episode 1 where the guy blows his head off, was spectacular start. It looked great. It was so cool how sometimes Fincher shoots from really far away, certain angles, and it really worked there. When Holden was interviewing the guy, holding the girl hostage, because you felt like you were in his shoes, because that's the distance he's seeing it from. So really good stuff there. A couple early episodes that threw me off was the sound mixing, honestly. Fincher clearly made the decision that certain scenes, like in the club, the sound would be louder in the background, like if you were actually in a club, than the dialogue. Which I get, it's giving the realistic feeling, again, like you're there, but it actually was getting annoying, and sometimes you have to accept it still is a show, and I want to hear what they're saying, and I like literally had to stand up some scenes to hear exactly what certain characters are saying. I noticed this more in the early episodes. It kind of toned that down towards the middle, but not even in club scenes, but in certain scenes, the background sounds were really loud and powering over the main character's dialogue, which got frustrating fast. So I get it as an artistic choice, but I don't know if it necessarily is worth that sacrifice of also making us work hard to hear things and missing important lines. Now, the sidekick Bill, I wasn't crazy about his acting at first. I wasn't sure if I liked it. Some of the scenes, the way they were directed, seemed like it was, all right, you could tell where they're like, all right, cut, walk out, have the grin on your face, and it felt kind of like a CBS detective show at points. I feel like it got away from that, and I got sold on his acting, and I thought he was great. But it did seem like it took him a little bit to get comfortable and warm up into the character. But what really sold me on this show was halfway through, when you realize it's not all about the action. It really cuts that to the back burner here, and all about getting in the minds of these serial killers and building solid main characters. Now, unanimously, if you read on Reddit or reviews of this show, and I'm going to agree with the public here that the best parts are when they're interviewing the serial killers, especially Ed Kemper. The actor of Ed Kemper, Cameron Britton, kills it as him, and I loved how Ed Kemper kind of loved Holden, and it was most connected to Holden out of anybody. And they had a great theme going on about mommy issues, which they've hinted at with Holden as well. So there was that connection the two of them had, and you could tell Holden was taking a liking to him, not just for interview purposes, but for other reasons, delving into his kind of psychotic side of him. And clearly from Ed Kemper, you can tell the different angles Bill and Holden had handling serial killers, and Bill always knew where, okay, stop, we're crossing the line, or Holden wants to always push the line. And for me, I always agree with Holden. I relate to Holden the most. I think they're clearly showing you he's the reason all these things changed in the FBI and that we got all this great research and saved more lives and understand serial killers better. Literally coming up with the name serial in this show, which was cool. He's challenging the status quo Holden all the time, and he's pushing what needs to be done to get the results you really want. And he knows that you have to understand them to get anything out of them and play their game for a bit, the serial killers. So I really related with Holden here and agree with him a lot. Please comment below who you side with the most, Wendy, Bill, or Holden. I'm really curious to that because I wonder, because I feel like a lot of people disagree with that. For sure, which is good. That's, I think, the whole point of this show is to get you thinking on many different sides and angles. Now, Jerry Brutos' guy was hysterical, in love with the high heels, and I love how they relate these cases to Holden's life, and that when he's having sex with his girlfriend, he sees her in the heels, and he's freaked out by it. Now, I was talking to someone I work with, and they were saying, no, he was just looking at the heels, freaked out because he just worked on a case with a serial killer with the heels, and they looked just like the ones he used. But I took it as it was partly that, but it was also him kind of being attracted to the heels a little more now, and he was taking that on and developing that from being around that thinking. That's how I looked at it. So I thought that was really well done and interesting. Because remember, too, there is a scene where he rubs his girlfriend's feet, and she's like, oh, are you getting into feet now, too? Big hint there. So that was also showing you how he's picking up some tendencies from these serial killers by opening himself up so much to them. And then when they talked to Richard Speck, the serial killer, that was a different level of nutty. Really good scene, and Holden really pushes the limits there and shows what needs to be done to get stuff out of these serial killers, and he gets a lot out of him, but then almost pushes him too far that he throws the bird in the fan, which was awesome, really cool, and so well shot, that whole scene. And that was a David Fincher directed episode towards the end because he did the last two. And the way this show ended with Holden's story, I really thought it did a really good job at showing how lonely he got at the end and alone, losing his girlfriend, losing the FBI's trust, losing his partner's trust, kind of distancing himself from everybody, and getting closer and closer to his subjects, the serial killers. And it really showed that feeling, everyone looking down on you, especially when he's in the office. Certainly as they shot scenes from his angle, I've felt that feeling before, and I could really relate to that, and that he just felt like, no one agrees with me. Am I crazy? Am I wrong here? But this man changed the game, so I was constantly rooting for him, and it shows how much people who are trendsetters and think differently have to push through so many people, so many layers, keep trying new things, and keep going, which I love about this story, and that's what shows how Holden was resilient. Now, Wendy got very unlikable towards the end to me. She really pissed me off when she played the tape for the boss. I thought that she was a little more rogue because when we first met her, she was also all about changing the game of the FBI and giving it more updated material, and she's a very intellectual person. But she became a little more like to the system of the FBI towards the end, which I thought was a little off for her character. But there's obviously a reason they're doing that. But I started liking her less and less each episode. I hope she comes a little more likable because she's part of the 3-team duo here that we're rooting for. But her character came a little bit of a disappointment. But her acting was still on par, and she did a great job at making you kind of not knowing how to feel about her. And again, can we trust her? Now, Bill really grew on me. I love that he couldn't really handle the dark stuff like Holden could. And he always mentioned how is this guy basically immune to this? And how does he just handle this so easy? Bill is clearly the most human here and feeling of emotions. And Bill really here for us in the audience, he's the normal one. He's the one normal people are going to relate to the most. He's sensible. He's realistic. He's rational. He's protective of the one he loves, where Holden's more of like a lone ranger. And the mystery to Holden is fascinating because we don't know anything about his past, which is going to give this show many seasons to come, I think. And what I love about this season was they left so much open and built so many seeds to great storylines to come. They didn't blow their load, let's say, this whole season. They just focused on building strong characters and a good story. Now, some people complained about the school episode with the guy tickling the feet, the principal. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was necessary to show more of how Holden's thinking is. that it really is for the good, but it also showed a really good debate that can kind of relate to current times now with all the harassment scandals in Hollywood of like, when is it, okay, this person's definitely in the wrong, or when is it too preventing, and that maybe this guy didn't mean bad, he just saw it the wrong way, the principal, and wasn't getting that he was coming off creepy. But then you see the wife come up the elevator saying he lost his job, it was his life, and then you kind of feel like maybe Holden was wrong there and he's feeling that himself. So that was a really good thing they got you thinking about as well. One of my biggest gripes in this show this season was I liked the girlfriend. People complained about her acting. I thought she did a good job though. She was more of not your typical girlfriend. She was independent. She was like very hippie, which makes sense at the time, and mysterious. So I don't think she was acting bad or boring. I think that she just knew how to play that character that they wanted. She served her purpose well. But what threw me off was the man Patrick she was going to school with that Holden was getting suspicious about. He goes to her exhibit at school, and it's in that dark room, and sees her cozying up with Patrick, and then she sees him see her, and he runs away, and she runs after him. But they never touch on that again. It feels like the next episode, they just forgot about it. They didn't even address it. So that was annoying to me and kind of frustrated me with the rest of Holden's story with his girlfriend in the end when they broke up, because he didn't even bring it up when she was dumping him, which I thought he would. So that kind of just slipped by because they ended an episode on that. So that was weird to me. I also love in this show how they're opening each episode with something that will lead to other seasons, showing pieces of the BTK killer, who's another real serial killer. And he's had stuff happen as recent of 2005. So this is probably going to be a story that's always little pieces for a couple seasons, and then we get it towards the end, which is really cool and well thought out, because he started doing stuff in the 70s and it kept going for a long time. He's a serious serial killer, and they're thinking the show out, it shows me, which is great. What was so great about Holden's character was like this fanboy thing he had about serial killers that freaked Bill out. Like, he hung up the Kemper cards that were sent to him in the office. And then when he's mentioning about serial killers he might meet to Bill, Bill's like, what, do you want an autograph from them? And it's true. There is that part of him that just admires it, which can be looked at many ways. But clearly the best scene of this whole season was when Kemper got up in the hospital and hugged Holden. At that moment, Holden knows Kemper could have easily just snapped his neck and he would have been dead. So he has like serious breakdown and runs out into the hallway, and it ends on such a crazy note with him like really losing himself, really making it interesting for where it's going to go next season. And it really was great too how they ended with everyone getting caught by the FBI as well for covering something up. So that's another great storyline they lead into. They have so much conflict they build up at the end that they left us hanging on, which is great. It makes you want to watch more. And it's already promising good stories, honestly, for next season, for sure. So David Fincher kills it again. I'm trying not to be biased. I love David Fincher, but I'm judging him like any other show, and he still, to me, did great. I love this show. It made me think the whole time. It's right up my alley. People who love psychological type thriller and a lot of thinking and a very smart show, this is it. There's no way you can complain with the characters here. The acting across the board was great. The writing was solid, and I cannot wait for more. I usually don't binge shows. This one I binged. That's how much I loved it. I'm going to give this season a 9. Super great for an opening season, and it seems like a show, if you're putting stock in, it's just going to get better and better. And I feel like the second season, people are kind of in the middle about season 1, which I've seen a lot. I feel like the second season is just going to be different level. So I cannot wait. Again, please comment below what you thought of the season as a whole. Did you like it? What would you give it as a rating, 1 to 10? And who would you relate to the most out of these 3 characters? I really want to know. Let me know down below who you agreed with, whose side you're on. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. I respond to everyone. Please subscribe. I do tons of TV shows, movie reviews, celebrity interviews, you name it. And please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram, and keep coming back.